Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of Sapience Thoughts, where we discuss theophilosophical issues, where we respond to those detractors of Islam and their arguments, in addition to making our own arguments for the veracity of Islam. Today, inshallah, we're going to be discussing the issue of geocentrism in the Quran, or the supposed geocentrism that the detractors had supposedly found in the Quran, all over the verses in the Quran that is so glaringly obvious for us that we have not been able to detect it. But let's take a look at this claim and see how honest it is, whether it's actually eisegetical or exegetical in nature. What is the claim? The claim is that in the Quran, in those verses where the orbits of the sun and the moon are mentioned, that this indicates to us, at least it implies to us, maybe in implicit reference or inference, that the sun is going around the earth. This is their claim. So what kind of verses do they use? Before I get to what kind of verses they use, we should point to the fact that we've done an entire video on the hadith of prostration of Abu Dharr al-Ghafari, and this can be found in the description box below. And you should be looking at, inshallah, also, if you have your time, all the other videos we've done in this series, because potentially we have other answers, because a lot of these videos are actually intertwined in terms of the themes and content of these videos. So let's move on and talk about where, in fact, they're talking about these geocentric references in the Quran. So they'll mention, for example, chapter number 39, verse number 5. يكور الليل على النهار ويكور النهار على الليل وسخر الشمس والقمر كل يجري لأجل مسمى. He rolls the day into the night, and he rolls the night into the day, and he has made the sun move subservient for you, and each of them are running in an orbit. So does this mean to say, from this verse, or other verses, but let's go with this verse first, that the sun is going around the earth? No, there is no such indication at all. The only way, in this verse, and we'll see in other verses that they quote, that you can come to the conclusion that is saying that the sun is going around the earth, is if you superimpose that understanding. You have already a preconceived understanding of geocentrism in the Quran, and now you are trying to force that interpretation onto the Quran. You will not find, quite frankly, any verse in the Quran which simply states the sun goes around the earth. And how easy would it have been for such a verse to be there? Look at Surah Shams, chapter number 91 of the Quran. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا وَاللَّيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا. The sun, and as it illuminates the day, or the rays of the light. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا. And as the moon follows the sun. Now, does this mean it's following in a geocentric orbit? No, it doesn't have to mean that, because in Islamic cosmology, we know that the day follows the night, and the night follows the day. And that's the anthropocentric phenomenological perspective. We see that the night, these are sequences that we see from our perspective. But actually, quite frankly, the moon does actually follow the sun. I mean, a lot of these individuals have not even touched the basics of cosmology. It's very surprising that they're making all these scientific claims and they don't realize that the sun is not just stationary, it's revolving around its own axis and it's running through the fabric of space, taking with it all of those planets that are around it, and of course all the moons that exist within the solar system as well. So in reality, the moon is actually following the sun, and also from our perspective, the moon is following the sun. Look at the beauty and the brevity and the conciseness of the Quranic expression, such that an individual doesn't have to do hermeneutical acrobatics or hermeneutical gymnastics in order to come to a conclusion like this. So we're not trying to force things into the book. They also mention chapter number 21, verse number 33, where it says that وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ, the sun and the moon, it says that all of it is in a falak, يَسْبَحُونَ. But that's true. The sun does have a falak. The moon does have a falak. How is that wrong from a heliocentric perspective? Once again, the argument is so lacking, quite frankly, so lacking. It's actually, I was contemplating whether or not to dignify this with a response. I really was, because it's so weak. Now, what is the strongest part of their argument? Let me discuss it with you. The strongest part of their argument, which is not strong at all, but let's just go with it, is those parts of the argument where they mention, for example, the qissa, or the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and his interaction with Nimrod, which is in chapter number 2, verse number 258. where Allah narrates that Ibrahim alayhi salam says, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْتِي بِالشَّمْسِ مِنَ الْمَشْرِقِ فَأْتِي بِهَا مِنَ الْمَغْرِبِ فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ. That Allah brings the sun from the east, so bring it from the west. And so this Nimrud, this king that he was having a conversation with, the interlocutor, was not able to do so, and then he was dumbfounded and bedazzled. And he realized, he was dumbstruck, if you want to call it that, whatever it may be. فَبُهِتَ الَّذِي كَفَرَ, the one who disbelieved. They say, look, it's saying here from the east and from the west, and therefore the assumption is a stationary earth and that the sun is going around the earth. Really? Because let's look at chapter number 18, verse number 17. Where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَتَرَى الشَّمْسَ إِذَا طَلَعَتْ تَزَاوَرُ عَنْ كَهْفِهِمْ ذَاتَ الْيَمِينِ وَإِذَا غَرَبَتْ تَقْرِضُهُمْ ذَاتَ الشِّمَالِ وَهُمْ فِي فَجْوَةٍ مِّنْهِ. That you see that when those individuals are in the cave, you see the sun, when it has rise, it goes to the left of them. And when it sets, it goes to the right of them. إذا طلعت تقرضهم وإذا غربت تقرضهم ذات الشمال. When it's setting, it's going at the left. So it's the right when it's rising and the left when it's setting. Now, what is right and left? Think about this for a second. Right and left will be absolutely useless references unless there is a point of reference. What do you mean by that? Even on a stationary earth model, or a stationary flat earth, or stationary round earth, whatever you want to say, the right and left have no meaning unless we're talking about a specific reference point. And if the Quran is talking about the right and left of them, yes, then this is perspectival. There's no doubt about that then. It has to be through the perspective of those individuals there. And what perspective is it? It's the anthropocentric phenomenological perspective. It has to be like that, otherwise it wouldn't make sense. It would be meaningless statements from the left and the right. Because, if you don't understand this, wallahi, this shows illiteracy, intellectual illiteracy, intellectual foolishness. Clearly, is from the anthropocentric perspective, from the human perspective as a reference point. So, if you look at all of those verses in the Quran, something quite interesting for your information. That if you look at chapter number 36, verse number 40, and that's actually funny enough, and interestingly enough, that's something they also mention. Chapter number 36, number 40, وَكُلٌ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. Before, and even the literalists, our literalist scholars, like you want to call him a literalist or whatever you want to call him, Al-Albani, he looked at this verse and he says, it starts from, I think it was verse number 24 or something like this, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَآيَةٌ لَهُمُ الْأَرْضُ الْمَيْتَةِ. That a sign for them is the dead earth. So he moves from the earth and then he goes to the sun, وَالشَّمْسُ تَجْرِي لِمُسْتَقَرٍ لَهَا. And then it goes to the qamar, وَالْقَمَرَ قَدَّرْنَاهُ مَنَازِلًا. And then he says, وَكُلٌ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. Showing, he makes the claim that, and linguistically this is possible. Linguistically, absolutely possible. It's ma'tuf. It's conjunctive. So it could absolutely be the case that the earth, the sun and the moon, all of them are in orbit. And that is linguistically possible. We're not going to say jazman, like absolutely this is the case, but it's a possibility. And from all of those perspectives and more, we show that the Quran is a timeless book with multi-layered facilitation. Meaning that if someone from the 7th century were to look at it and approach it with their naturalistic understanding and outlook, they would not be confused. And when someone from our century, 21st century, looks at it, we would not be confused. And we don't even find it, quite frankly, against the cosmology of today, or the popular cosmologies of today. So from all of those perspectives and more, it would seem that they are clutching at straws, trying their best, really trying their best, to force an eisegesis of the Quran with their superimpositions and their contriving, their pretextual contriving into the verses of the Quran. And I would say that this is a fool's attempt, and it has been disproven and debunked, and it should be left in the dustbin of history. And I hope this answers the question. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.